As Japanese politics continues to evolve at a dizzying pace, the resignation of the Katayama cabinet has forced the Japanese government to decide on the next prime minister. The prime minister is elected by majority vote in the Diet. Therefore, elections were held in both the House of Representatives and the House of Councilors to nominate the prime minister. As a result, Hitoshi Ashida of the Democratic Party was elected to the House of Representatives, and Shigeru Yoshida of the Liberal Party was elected to the House of Councilors. In the event of a conflict of opinion between the House of Representatives and the House of Councilors, a form called the Bicameral Council will be established to reconcile the differences. But neither side compromised at the Bicameral Council. Therefore, in accordance with the constitutional provision that the House of Representatives is superior, Hitoshi Ashida, who was elected by the House of Representatives, was chosen as Prime Minister. Having been elected Prime Minister, Hitoshi Ashida appointed the Ministers of State who would make up the cabinet. However, the Democratic Party he leads does not have a majority in the House of Representatives. Therefore, the Democratic Party needed to form a coalition government with other parties in order to stabilize the running of the Diet. So, Hitoshi Ashida wanted to gain the cooperation of the Liberal Party and visited Shigeru Yoshida. Shigeru Yoshida pointed out that there were differences between the Liberal Party and the Democratic Party in certain respects. The question is whether we can cooperate with the Japan Socialist Party. Democrats may be able to do that, but the Liberal Party can't do that. Therefore, the Liberal Party cannot cooperate in a coalition with the Democratic Party. Shigeru Yoshida announced that the Liberal Party would not form a coalition government with the Democratic Party. Like the previous cabinet, the Ashida cabinet was formed as a coalition cabinet consisting of the Democratic Party, the Japan Socialist Party, and the National Cooperative Party. However, there is no point in restructuring the cabinet if this is the case. As a result, the Ashida cabinet was criticized immediately after its inception for passing the government around, and was an unpopular administration from the start. When the Ashida cabinet was formed in Japan, major changes were occurring in the world. It's the Cold War. The Cold War was a conflict between the capitalist camp led by the United States and the socialist camp led by the Soviet Union. As this conflict intensified, the United States feared that if things continued as they were, the Soviet Union's power would grow in Asia. Therefore, the United States felt that it was necessary to strengthen Japan so that it could compete with the Soviet Union. The United States changed its occupation policy towards Japan. The occupation policy up to that point had been to weaken Japan so that it would never be able to wage war again. However, this changed to a policy of rebuilding Japan. As a result, factories that produced airplanes, weapons, ammunition, etc., which had been seized by GHQ, were deemed necessary for the recovery of the Japanese economy and were released. Systems were put in place to allow them to freely accept money, resources, and other things from abroad. Post-war Japan reached a major turning point. Former diplomat Shigeru Yoshida was one of the first to notice this change in American policy. America is fighting against the socialist camp in the world. In Japan, the socialist camp is left-wing, so this is an opportunity for us. So Shigeru Yoshida decided to gather right-wing forces and form a large political party. Thus, Shigeru Yoshida left the Democratic Party and absorbed forces calling themselves the Comrades Club and the Democratic Club into the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. And he formed a new political party. This is the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. And former diplomat Hitoshi Ashida, like Shigeru Yoshida, noticed the change in American policy. He noticed that Japan was now able to accept money and resources from abroad, and he wanted to use this opportunity to revive the Japanese economy. Thus, the Ashida cabinet decided to introduce foreign capital in order to overcome the declining production capacity that had plagued successive governments since the end of the war. Furthermore, the Ashida cabinet promoted the restructuring of companies and improved management, thereby creating an environment in which more investment could be made from abroad. In this way, the Ashida cabinet began to rebuild the Japanese economy by introducing capital from overseas. Upon hearing this policy, the Japan Socialist Party and the Satomei of Japanese governments believed that the best way to rebuild Japan was through the efforts of the Japanese people. However, they reluctantly agreed to the move, believing that the introduction of foreign capital would be an opportunity to revive production. On the other hand, the Japanese Communist Party and the Sanbetsu believed that Japan's assets would be controlled by foreign capital. They also strongly opposed this policy, as they believed that corporate restructuring and management reform would result in Japanese workers being laid off. This led to a fierce conflict within Japan between those in favor of introducing foreign capital and those opposed. And the labor movement became active again. The All Government and Public Sector Workers Union Liaison Council, centered around the All Japan Postal and Communications Workers Union, conducted a particularly vigorous campaign. In short, it was the civil servants. Shortly after taking office, the Ashida cabinet asked public servants unions to approve the salary standards set by the previous cabinet. The union rejected the offer, claiming that the amount was inappropriate. They planned a massive strike. The Ashida cabinet continued to meet with civil servant labor unions, but negotiations broke down. Finally, civil servants went on strike. Moreover, they were preparing to go on strike across the country. If things continue as they are, the Ashida cabinet will be in danger of facing a general strike by civil servants. As with the February 1st general strike, it was GHQ that saved the Ashida cabinet from this crisis. GHQ said, "During the February 1st general strike, we told you that strikes at government offices constitute a violation of the objectives of the occupation." GHQ notified the Japanese government that it expected prompt action to prevent strikes. As a result, with the cooperation of GHQ, the planned general strike was cancelled and the violating workers were arrested. In response to this civil servant strike uproar, Hitoshi Ashida also believed that civil servant strikes needed to be regulated, and began preparing measures to do so. The labor struggle, which had been gaining momentum, began to die down. Having thus overcome the general strike, the Ashida cabinet was finally ready to take to the Diet. In this Diet session, attention was focused on the issue of railway and communication tariff hikes, which was also the cause of the collapse of the previous Katayama cabinet. And Parliament has been discussing ways to resolve the issue. However, the Democratic Party, the Japan Socialist Party, and the National Cooperative Party continue to insist on their own multipliers, making it impossible for them to reach an agreement. In the end, the three party leaders, Hitoshi Ashida, Tetsu Katayama, and Takeo Miki, met and forcibly reached a consensus, which resulted in the budget bill being passed. Naturally, this response generated backlash within each party. Members of the Japan Socialist Party and the Democratic Party of Japan who opposed the bill left their respective parties. The budget was passed at the cost of many sacrifices. Once the budget was passed and the Diet session ended, political parties began preparing for what they expected to be an imminent snap election. In particular, Shigeru Yoshida believed that the reason for the failure of the first Yoshida cabinet was that it lacked a power base. So he focused on strengthening the power base of the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan, 1948. He recruited 28 outstanding former bureaucrats, including Eisaku Sato, Vice Minister of Transport, and Hayato Ikeda, Vice Minister of Finance, into the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan, and he solidified the foundation of the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. He wanted them to run in the next general election and lead Japan through the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan, which had strong policy-making capabilities. The ruling party could not remain silent when it learned that the opposition Liberal Democratic Party of Japan was preparing for an election. However, within the Japan Socialist Party, one of the ruling parties, conflict continued between the right and left wings. The situation continued where the right wing advocated continuing the coalition with the Democratic Party of Japan, while the left wing advocated dissolving the coalition. Tetsu Katayama argued that remaining in the current coalition government would cause political turmoil and would not be good for the Japan Socialist Party, so the House of Representatives should be dissolved. Finally, the Japan Socialist Party began to follow its own path. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party of Japan and the National Cooperative Party have resumed merger talks to form a new party, which they had once abandoned. As expected, the Japan Democratic Party and the National Cooperative Party did not agree on anything, and the plan failed. The composition of the opposition and the collapse of the coalition government put the Ashida government in a difficult position. Once again, it was GHQ that saved the Ashida cabinet. Douglas MacArthur is concerned that the labor component is once again becoming stronger and has written to Prime Minister Hitoshi Ashida. Civil servants work for the people. Therefore, it is wrong for public servants to put pressure on the public by going on strike. So he instructed the Ashida cabinet to restrict civil servant strikes. In response to this directive, the Ashida cabinet issued a government ordinance denying public servants the right to collective bargaining and the right to strike. This is Imperial Ordinance number 201. The Ashida cabinet had to review the laws relating to civil servants. The Ashida cabinet then convened an extraordinary session of the Diet and carried out revisions to the National Public Service Act and other laws. While the Ashida cabinet is carrying out these tasks, it will be difficult to dissolve the Diet or for the cabinet to resign en masse. Therefore, Imperial Ordinance number 201 also had the effect of prolonging the life of the Ashida cabinet. However, the Ashida cabinet did not last long and was forced to resign en masse. The cause of this was the Showa Denko scandal. Showa Denko was a fertilizer manufacturing company. The company was involved in producing fertilizer, which was necessary for the post-war reconstruction of agriculture, and borrowed money from the Reconstruction Finance Bank. However, during the screening process, Showa Denko realized that they wanted to borrow more money. So Showa Denko entertained important people from the government in GHQ, and gave them bribe. When the allegations came to light, Showa Denko bribed politicians and foreign journalists to cover them up. But when an investigation into the allegations began, it naturally came to light. This is how Showa Denko's president, Setsuzo Hinahara, was arrested. Those who received bribe included Takeo Fukuda of the Ministry of Finance, former Secretary General of the Japan Liberal Party and former Minister of Finance, and Suehiro Nishio, who served as Deputy Prime Minister. The problem was that influential figures in the political world were being arrested one after another. As a result, the Ashida cabinet lost credibility and Hitoshi Ashida decided to resign en masse. It was a short-lived cabinet that lasted less than 8 months.